Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, on this 15th day of the month of Shawwal of the year 1438 after the Hijrah, coinciding with the 9th of the month of July of the year 2017, we greet you all with the greeting of Islam, and we say to you all, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We take break from our study in spirituality and focus on a matter that is timely for the community at present, and it is the onset of a study concerning marriage and family life. What we would like to do is to take a general overview of marriage within the faith of Islam, and as time progresses, delve more deeply into that topic and highlight and investigate particular matters related to this particular subject. Understanding this, we thought it becoming to open this discussion with Kitabun Nikah, with the Book of Marriage, from the renowned work Minhaj al-Salikin wa Tawdih al-Fiqh fi ad-Din. The path of the journeyman, if you like, and elucidation of jurisprudence in the religion. This is a work in fiqh, a work in jurisprudence that has been authored by the renowned scholar, Sheikh Abdurrahman ibn Nasr al-Sa'di, or as the family refers to themselves, a Sa'di, who was born in the year 1307 Anno Hijri, who was born in the year 1307 after the Hijrah, and who passes in the year 1376 after the Hijrah. He was a profound scholar in the religion generally, but especially in tafsir of the Quran, in the exegesis of the Quran, in fiqh of the religion, in jurisprudence of the religion, and sciences that are connected to that, such as usul al-fiqh, such as legal theory, such as maqasid al-sharia, such as the goals of the legislation of Islam, such as al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, such as fiqh principles, jurisprudence principles, maxims of law, as it were, thus and so. And he was also a profound scholar in the sciences of theology as well, in the sciences of R.E.D.A. as well. Understanding this, he also had commonality and even depth in sciences of the hadith and what is connected to that as well. In any regard, he is the primary teacher of one of the greatest scholars of our time, and he is a Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen. May Allah bestow mercy upon his soul, as well as many other great scholars of our time as well. This work, Minhaj al-Salikin, the author produced this work for his younger students. And customarily and historically, typically, from the time of Sheikh As-Sa'di backward, the primary book in fiqh that was studied and memorized amongst them was a work called Dalil al-Talib. And this is a primary work in Hanbali fiqh. as these scholars that we're referring to at present are Hanbali scholars from the Arabian Peninsula, from what became Saudi Arabia. Jalil al-Talib was the primary work in fiqh that was studied, memorized, and such at that time. However, Sa'di rahimahullah came into the impression that a work, Zad al-Mustaqni', should be studied. And there are comparative articles between Jalil al-Talib and Zad al-Mustaqni', the virtues of them, which one is better or more suitable for different students of knowledge and with situations. And that's beyond the scope of this discussion. However, we say that to say, As-Sa'di became of the view that it was better for his students to begin memorizing and studying Zad al-Mustaqni' as opposed to Jalil al-Talib. And this is the reason why R.E.D.A rahimahullah ta'ala memorized and studied Zad al-Mustaqni'. And many works that we benefit in this time in Hanbali fiqh, whether we know it's from Hanbali fiqh or not, are being premised on Zad al-Mustaqni'. For example, the renowned work Sharh al-Mumti' of Uthaymin, the voluminous work in fiqh, is actually his explanation of Zad al-Mustaqni'. Mulakhas al-Fiqhi, the what is it in English? Summarized Fiqh by Sheikh Salih Fawzan. Is that the title of it in English? This is also Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, may Allah preserve him, offering his own commentary from memory in his own summarization of the issues that exist in Zad al-Mustaqni'. Right, so much of what we are receiving from that region of the earth and fiqh is premised upon Zad al-Mustaqni', and what then goes beyond that, what is built upon that. In any regard, in this time period, those scholars that are springing boarding off of that work today, this kind of began around this time of the Sa'di, rahimahullah ta'ala, and scholars that were of his particular era. Not limited to him, but scholars of that particular era began imparting and encouraging students to study this particular work. We say all this to say, As-Sa'di utilized the masjid as in Islamic school, in Islamic study, from the kindergarten years up to university level, without it being in accredited college. So he utilized the masjid as a learning center, as has been done for a very long period, going back into classical Islamic scholarship. Now, the challenge that he had faced was that in the beginning of a person seeking knowledge in fiqh, yes, there are such works as conditions of the prayer that you all are familiar with because we studied that with one another. Beyond conditions of the prayer, Adab al-Mashi ila Salah, the etiquette of walking to the prayer. Right, these books by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, may Allah bestow mercy upon us all, which are also Hanbali works in themselves. We should know that now. But there was a gap between that level of study and then getting into Zad al-Mustaqni'. There was a gap. So he was trying to figure out how to kind of bridge that particular gap. So he came up with this work, Minhaj as-Sadiqeen, that he authored for that purpose, to bridge that gap between the, what we'll say, a rudimentary or tertiary level of studying fiqh, studying jurisprudence, into a more academic path of studying fiqh. So we have this work. So this work, he put it into place for those individuals who were on the path of seeking knowledge, but maybe they were in their pubescent, adolescent years, we'll say, right, in the onset of that, to serve as that particular gap. Understanding this, though, Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala himself, by the time he was 16, he had memorized the Alfiya of Ibn Malik in Arabic grammar and morphology, Nahu and Sarf. He had also memorized Bulugh al-Maram, a primary book in Hadith al-Ahkam, in those ahadith that speak to the verdicts that exist in the faith of Islam and Islamic law, the primary hadith that are utilized in that. He memorized that work. depending on what numbering system you're utilizing. There are 1,350 hadith in that particular work. And he had also memorized Zad al-Mustaqni', which is a foundational work that is memorized in Hanbali fiqh, which is said to be comprised of approximately 3,000 issues, 3,000 separate issues in fiqh. And there are those that add onto that number, but approximately 3,000 issues in fiqh, we'll say.
And that's in Hanbali or in Zad al-Mustaqni'?
Zad al-Mustaqni' is Hanbali fiqh. Zad al-Mustaqni' is Hanbali fiqh.
But I wasn't sure if you say the 3,000 issues.
Oh, in Zad al-Mustaqni', about 3,000 issues that exist in Zad al-Mustaqni'. Some of them go much further, and they'll say up to 6,000, but Allahu A'lam. Right, 3,000 is a safe number. But Uthaymin had that by 16, and he was in the school of a Sa'di, and he was there when this work was produced, meaning that he would have studied this work before the age of 16, right, to give us a range about when this work is studied. So your conditions of the prayer, your etiquette of walking to the prayer, perhaps they are, 6 and 10 and this type of range, but between 10 and let's say 16 or so, an individual is studying Minhaj al-Salikin in fiqh, and by 16 or greater, perhaps they were studying Zad al-Mustaqni', we'll say, as Uthaymin had completed his memorization of Zad al-Mustaqni' by the age of 15. So this particular work, Minhaj al-Salikin, it covers all of the primary issues that exist in fiqh, in both subjects of, or both major categorizations of fiqh, we'll say. Any book of fiqh is divided into two major categorizations. You have Kitab al-Ibadat and Kitab al-Mu'amalat. You have the book of worship, and you have the book of social interaction. The book of worship and the book of social interaction. In the book of worship, you're going to primarily be covering the pillars of Islam, and that which is connected to that. So the pillars of Islam, as far as fiqh is concerned, as far as jurisprudence is concerned, they are what? They are 4 pillars of Islam that are directly connected to fiqh. They are what? Salah, Zakah, Hajj,
and
fasting. Good. So we have prayer. We have the annual almsgiving, or if you like, the annual tax in Islam, if that is an appropriate term. We have, or appropriate phraseology, we have fasting, the month of Ramadan, and we have Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Good. So in ibadat, it will cover these areas and what is connected to them. For example, we cannot speak about prayer without speaking to what precedes prayer, which is wudu, right? Ablution or purification, right? So we have the book of purification. And in the beginning of the book of purification, we have the chapter related to water, because we often utilize water to purify ourselves so that we can enter into prayer. Make sense? Okay. Then we have mu'amalat. We have the book of social interaction. And quite frequently in the beginning of the book of social interaction, you'll have buyu', you'll have commerce, business, transactions, and very soon after that, you're going to see Kitabun Nikah, the book of marriage. Yes.
First time I've heard mu'amalat referred to as social interaction.
As opposed to?
I don't know, it was just some long, non-understandable statement.
Some long, indiscernible statement. But that's what it is, social interaction. Because in mu'amalat, you're going to have business transactions. It's us dealing with one another every day. You have marriage, right? This is a social, right, interaction. You're going to come into the, for example, the book of libas, clothing, for example. You're going to have the chapter of itq, the chapter of freeing slaves, right? And this is important for us to understand, especially for our Pan-African community, right? May Allah guide us and guide them, in that Islam was pivotal in putting guidelines for regulating slavery in the world with the goal of abolishing slavery in entirety. That's Islam that started that and was eventually successful with that. we say that for our brothers and sisters in the Pan-African community that like to mention the transatlantic slave trade, but also highlight, and rightfully so, but highlight at times pointedly people's ignorance of the Arab slave trade. You follow? Because we will mention how Christianity was utilized to enslave the people, and as such, a reason to that being a reason to then leave the faith of Christianity because it was utilized to enslave us. So because of that, so long as we are still taking that particular faith as our own, we're still holding on to a portion of our mental, spiritual, and emotional bondage. You follow? Okay. In that time, Muslims will utilize that particular argument. So the Pan-African community will come back and then highlight the Arab slave trade, right? And will utilize the same line of thought for Islam. And to say so long as we are embodying or taking Islam as our faith of practice, then we are still placing ourselves in the same mental, physical, emotional bondage that the Christians are. You follow? So it is important to understand, one, the difference between Arabs and Islam, the difference between what preceded the specific Islam of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and that what succeeded it. There's a difference between those two historically, right? But then after that, understanding the goals of Islam and how Islam regulated slavery and how Islam abolished slavery and why there are so many encouragements in Islam directly or indirectly, physically or by way of virtue, to free slaves, even if it is only changing one's mindset to that particular mindset. You follow? For example, there are certain sins that exist inside of our faith that if it occurs, the only expiation for that, or rather, the initial or primary expiation for that is to free a slave, right? Before anything else. For example, a person says to his wife, you are to me like my mother. It's called dhihar, turning your back to your wife, right? Meaning the same way that a person would be intimate with his mother, you are now like this with your wife. The primary expiation for that, to fix that, when you repent, free a slave. Find a slave, free a slave. Islam started instituting this. You follow? An individual is intimate, has intercourse with their spouse during the daylight hours of Ramadan. The first way to expiate oneself from that, along with repentance, is what? Free a slave. You follow? A person says, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, lahu mulku, wa lahu hamdu, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. There's none that has the right to be worshipped except for Allah. Dominion belongs to Him. Praise belongs to Him, and He has the ability to do all things. If we translated that correctly, our minds are moving fast at present. Please forgive us. But a person who says that 100 times in the morning or in the evening, the reward for that is as though you freed 10 slaves. You say it 10 times, it's as though you freed one slave. That's and so throughout the entire of Islamic text. There's even a chapter in fiqh, in the book of social interaction, in mu'amalat, specified to that. Kitab al-It, the chapter of freeing slaves. So that we know how to go about that correctly. You follow? In any regard, there are other things that come in the book of social interaction as well. For example, jihad. This comes in the book of social interaction because there are times when war takes place, whether we like it to or not. But we understand what war is, and we have guidelines for that in our faith, both offensively and defensively. This is studied in mu'amalat and on and on and on. But in nikah, no. Okay, let him know I'll be done shortly, inshallah. May Allah reward you. Appreciate you. Allahumma musta'an, our appointments are overlapping today. In any regard, we have the book of marriage. The book of marriage. It comes in social interaction. We are highlighting this because of the fact that we should understand that marriage as an independent entity falls under social interaction. It doesn't fall under worship. This is why we're saying all this. This is the point that we're coming to. Yes, it is possible by way of the intent of the individual that it becomes an act of worship, but the act itself, the union itself, falls under social interaction and falls under contractual agreements. Social interaction and contractual agreements. When we understand it in this light, then we understand that there are many cultural areas that are entered into this social union that we call marriage that are acceptable in our faith. And there are areas where culture is utilized as an evidence in our faith. Marriage is one of those institutions. We follow that? Okay. Now, culture is acceptable in Islam so long as it does not conflict with revelation, so long as it does not conflict with Islam. At the time that culture conflicts with Islam, we then give precedence to Islam over culture. We will give precedence to revelation over culture. We will give precedence to the words of our Lord over our culture. Along with this, Islam puts in place guidelines for marriage and regulators for marriage to assist us in having positive, productive, fruitful marriages. So far, so good. You're on the same page? Okay. So we are looking at marriage from this perspective whenever we are speaking about it in fiqh. As-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, he states here, and it, meaning marriage, is from the sunan of the messengers. Marriage is from the traditions of the prophets and the messengers. 124,000 prophets, 317 messengers, we will say, although there are varying wordings of that particular hadith on authority of Abu Dharr, with varying numbers. We understand then that from the time of Adam, alayhi salam, marriage has been a primary social interaction and a primary institution to bring stability to society. So if that is the case, then we understand that the family structure brings structure to the societies that we live in. So if the family structure, beginning with marriage, is bringing structure to the societies that we live in, then it is a very important institution for us to understand and for us to be successful in, for our own health, our own benefit, and for future generations. For if we are not successful in our own marital unions, then how can we expect our children, our grandchildren, who are society after us, to be successful in their unions? These things are very, very important. And conversely, we must come to understand the ill effects of pre-marital relationships and extra-marital relationships, the damages that brings about, and also ways to solve those challenges before they occur and after they occur as well. Many of these discussions will hover around the book of marriage and what is connected to the book of marriage. And many of these resolutions are found and discussed in Islam. Much of it found in the book of marriage. So we saw this to give some background about the importance of what we are going to embark upon. So marriage is from the tradition of the prophets. And there was coming a hadith, Ya ma'ashir shabab, O youth, من استطاع منكم الباء فيتزوج فإنه أغض للبصر وأحسن للفرج ومن لم يستطيع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاء متفق عليه. O youth, O young folk, whoever amongst you all has the ability to marry, then this person should do so. For it is healthier for the gaze and more protective for the private parts. And whoever does not have that ability, then it is upon that person to fast, for certainly it is a shield. This hadith is agreed upon. Agreed upon here meaning what? Meaning that we can find this hadith collected in al-Bukhari as well as in Muslim. So does this mean now, when we open up Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, necessarily that we'll find this exact wordage in both al-Bukhari and Muslim for it to be agreed upon? No? So what are we saying when we say it's agreed upon? What will we find in al-Bukhari and Muslim? What are the possibilities? If we're saying it doesn't have to be this exact wordage, what are we saying?
That that the narrator, that the chain is the same?
That the chain is the same?
I would say I would say that the narration...
It's possible to have the same, it's not a different method. Possible to have the same chain of narration, but then the text of the hadith differs. It can be a totally different hadith with the same chain. Possible.
So yes, the wording is the same.
Same wording. So this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. So when we go into the book of marriage in Bukhari and Muslim, let's say, good place to start, let's say, if we want to find a hadith about marriage, right? Go into the book of marriage in Bukhari and Muslim, and we're going to find this the same hadith with the same words in both Bukhari and Muslim. That's what we're saying when we're saying the hadith is agreed upon. Our sisters say? Either that or different narration, meaning what? Same meaning of the hadith with a different wording. Good. So when we say a hadith is agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim, we're saying one of two things. We're saying the wordage is exactly the same in Bukhari and Muslim, or the meaning is the same in Bukhari and Muslim with a different wordage. Either way is still agreed upon. More often than not, it will bear the same meaning but different wording. More rarely will it be the same exact wording and meaning. But either way, it's agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. So far, so good? Ya ma'ashir shabab, O group of young folk, O young people. So the address here is the people that are young. Now, from an Islamic standpoint, young means under 40. From an Islamic standpoint, young means under 40. However, the encouragement for that, historically, from the Islamic standpoint, but also from a societal standpoint at large, throughout history, is in the years of adolescence. In the years of adolescence, for this particular encouragement. If we look throughout history, look throughout varying cultures, and look to when people were marrying, it was quite commonly during the years of adolescence. So this is where this encouragement is falling. Now, interestingly enough, in this society here today, we would frequently discourage people to enter into these types of arrangements we would discourage them to do this before the age of 18. Because in this country, we will say an adult is an adult at the age of 18. However, when you look into the reasons why the number 18 was chosen, that number was chosen for capitalistic and industrial reasons. Now, prior to that, and this is not a long period of time, we're 2017, so we're speaking about 100 years or less, right? Because the industrial age begins in the 1920s forward, right? In this type of a range, right? I'm not a historian, but in that range, a little before, a little after. Okay. Prior to that, we don't have to look very far. Us ourselves, our grandparents and great-grandparents were often telling us that they were marrying at the age of what? What do your grandparents tell you? The age that they got. I know what age my grandmother was when she married.
Grandmother was intended at 15, 16.
Your grandmother was intended at 15, 16. My grandmother married at 16. That was the norm. That just changed, right? Not because of benefits to society, not because of what culture actually was, not because of what is beneficial for those adolescents at that age, right, for us to be supporting them as needed, but it was deferred because of industrial and capitalistic reasons. We won't go into that this time. Look into that for yourself. Do your history. Okay. Typically, and historically, as you go back hundreds and even thousands of years, it was common for many women to begin exploring the idea of marriage at the age where they became pubescent, which for many societies was when her menstrual cycle began. In many societies, this is when a woman became a woman, and their society was structured around that and building the men and women around that. You follow? Unfortunately, we're on the other side of that. We're on the other swing of that pendulum now. We're now adolescence from a psychological standpoint does not end at 18. They've now extended it to 23. You follow? So understand that. But in any regard, the address here, ya ma'ashar shabab, O group of young folk, O group of youth, the address is here. Whoever amongst you all has the ability, has the ba'a, then they should marry. What is ability here? What does ability to marry mean? What do we think this means? Please. The means, meaning, you're right, the means, but what's the financial? The financial means? Keep going. So when you marry someone, you don't want them to have money.
Intellect.
Intellect.
Maturity.
Maturity. Anything else? Having knowledge of the religion. Good. So al-ba'a, ability here bears three meanings. Or rather, there are three views on what ability here means. One is financial, as you stated. The financial means to marry. Secondly, and of course that's more pointed to the men here, right? R.E.D.A. qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa, men are the maintainers and protectors of women. Secondly, the physical or the physicality, if you will, to marry. You have the physical ability to marry and satisfy your spouse, right? That's the second view. The third view is both. So financially and whatever is connected to finance, right? Education, skill set, whatever have you, you have that. And whatever is connected to the physical ability, you have that. Person that has those two things, you have the ability to marry. So now there is an encouragement to marry. Istihbaban, meaning that it is recommended to marry. If one does so, there may be a reward for that person. If one does not, there's no sin upon that person. right, as per this particular narration. But the institution of marriage as an independent entity in and of itself, mubah, permissible. Not necessarily something that one is rewarded for or one gains sin for as an independent entity. You follow? But when we add other matters to it, it can become one or the other, or others outside one or the other too. Now, the Prophet ﷺ states that it is aghaddu lil basar. It is healthier for the gaze. Meaning what? Those natural desires that we have for the opposite gender. That for many people, those type of desires begin to manifest themselves in the human being around what time period in a person's life? When we start getting those types of feelings? Maturity? Oh, Ibrahim sat up for that one. Around what time does that begin to kind of emerge?
Naturally, or I would say now kids are exposed to a lot more earlier. Therefore, the desire or interest is earlier. Okay,
let's look at both. Naturally and in this hyper-social environment that we live in. What do you say?
I'll say 12, 13.
12, 13. Okay. So again, we are still teetering around the pubescent years, right? Around the time of puberty and adolescence, when these things begin to emerge. Therefore, we need to acknowledge that, right? We need to acknowledge that and provide resolution for that. Not ignore it, not say deal with it, not say wait until you are 18 necessarily, right? Not say wait until after college. Different situations are different, but we need to not ignore it and act as though it is not something that is real. Because in our ignoring that, as is the case in this society, right? When we ignore that natural need and sometimes hunger, right? That desire, what then comes about in our society? Premarital relations, which then leads to well, we don't know. Now we shy. Okay, intercourse, children outside of wedlock, right? Experimentation. Okay, good, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, those things go together in this society, right? Okay. Also, illnesses and diseases that emerge. Sometimes, some of them that people have to live with for the rest of their lives that cannot be treated to a point that they are cured. They can only be managed, right? So all these things are now affecting the next generation. Now the next generation has to deal with all of that because we chose to ignore it or not put resolution in place, or at least put them on the path to marrying, so that when they become of age, even if we're saying 18 or collegiate years or after that, at least they've been on a path that they can grow into that space, not where they have to go off on their own and kind of just figure it out without us, and then we have to deal with whatever results come out of that, as is often the case. May Allah help us. So it is better for the lowering of the gaze, because if that desire is being fulfilled, then a person then knows where to channel that desire. Islam is a very natural religion. It doesn't necessarily cut one off from desire, but it gives us the healthiest and the most beneficial channels of exploring those desires for oneself and for society at large. Islam provides that. وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ, and it is also more protective for one's private parts, and we discussed that as well. Channeling that particular desire, protecting one from children outside of wedlock, from disease, and from exposure to behaviors that are unnatural behaviors, and behaviors that are destructive behaviors. And whoever doesn't have the ability to do that, because it is commonplace that many times people that are younger, if they do not have the support of their immediate family or the community or the society at large, which we should be looking to put those things into place. But if that doesn't exist, then there must be another option available for them to at least tame that desire, and that is فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ. Then it is upon this person to fast, فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ. For certainly this will be a shield for that person, a shield for them in that desire that they have. Not that that desire will go away in totality, but it will assist them in being able to better manage that desire that they do have, so that they do not do things that are unnatural, unbecoming, humiliating, or displeasing to Allah the Blessed and the Exalted. And the Prophet ﷺ, he has stated in this hadith that we'll mention and then explore in our next sitting, تُنْكَحُ الْمَرْأَةِ لِأَرْبَعٍ. A woman is married for 4 reasons: لِمَالِهَا وَحَسَبِهَا وَجَمَالِهَا وَدِينِهَا. For her wealth, for her stature, for her beauty, and for her religiosity. فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَمِينِكَ أو تَرِبَتْ يَمِينُكَ. So select the one who possesses religiosity. May your right hand be dust covered. This hadith is also agreed upon. And wealth, stature, beauty, religion. Again, wealth, stature, beauty, and religion. And there are details in this hadith that we need to explore, because unfortunately this hadith is commonly misunderstood and misapplied. And because of us misunderstanding and then misapplying this hadith in American Muslim culture, we often end up shortchanging ourselves and often end up in either unhappy marriages, dysfunctional marriages, or in divorce. So we want to discuss, when we have more time, the meanings of this particular hadith, and we'll move forward with the remainder of the book of marriage as Allah allows us. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على محمد.